Think about it. Think about it.
And welcome back to High School Basketball Weekly. Tim Morey alongside of Rick Bula. Incredibly, we are almost at the halfway mark of this high school basketball season. And Rick, we had a great week last week of games, which we're going to cover here on High School Basketball Weekly. And we've got some great games coming up as well that we're going to be able to cover for our viewing audience. And Rick, we're going to get right into it. With some of the girls' action. Of course, a team that has not played of late due to some cancellations, the Lady Hornets of McCann, they've been off, but they're going to swing back into action next week, and we've got them as our game of the week here when they take on Renaissance. So that's a big game for McCann, Rick, and they stand at 1-5 right now, but they've got a boatload of games coming up due to cancellations and scheduling issues.
Yeah, they had a game on January 6th postponed against Athol, and so their next game, Tim, is on tonight actually against Wildcats, and that's pretty much a must-win for Coach Kathy Budai's kids. Lee's a little bit down this year. If you take a look at the girls Franklin West, they're kind of at the bottom right now. McCann in the league is 0-3, Lee's 0-4. Overall, McCann's 1-5, Lee's 1-6. So Lee's probably looking at this one saying, hey, this is a must-win for us. It's a must-win for the Lady Hornets too. And so hopefully, they can get these games straightened out and get on the winning track again. And then we're looking forward to going down next week on the 17th, Renaissance at McCann. Hopefully it'll be a competitive game. Renaissance is only 1-3 in their league and 4-4 overall. So better overall record, but you never know. The Hornets usually have a tendency to play very well at home. Coach Budai probably has spent as much time on the floor with her pinstripes refereeing JV games lately as she has exactly. Coaching her team and practicing with her team. When they do get out there, though, Tim, I make no mistake about it. They've got to score some points. The rim has had a top on it. It's just they've been having trouble scoring points. They're going to have to get some points from Hannah Boisvert, from Tatro, Macy Tatro, right. And also Addie Heyer, their guard. A few other kids have stepped up. Carol Marsh. They got some kids that can play basketball. It's just you got to get out there and do it, and hopefully they can string a few together.
Turning now to Mount Greylock, Rick, the Mounties, they had a bit of a tough week. They had played two very, very tough games this past week, and they came up on the short end of both of them as Coach Jacoby's team now falls to a overall record of 2-5 and 2-4 in their league. But nothing to be ashamed of. These were very, very competitive ball games in both instances.
Yeah, they were. They probably very disappointing to the Lady Mounties. They look at Drury, who's a kind of a neighbor rival, and also in the same league. They're in the Girls Central in Pioneer Valley, and it was a league game. It's always a big game. They always they really claw and fight, those two teams, when they play one another, no matter if it's in Williamstown or up at the Bucky Bullet Gym. But Drury got the better of Greylock, 50-41. Charlotte Cootie, the outstanding sophomore, led the way for the Lady Mounties with 11. Molly Sullivan had 8. And then they played a very, very good team, Springfield ICS, the former Sabbath team, Tim. 77-39, Charlotte Cootie, again leading the way. She had 20 points. In that ball game, I'd like to note, ladies and gentlemen, even though we don't cover outside Berkshire County, that the Bulldogs, Alicia Mitchell, scored a 1,000th point.
Right.
So kudos to her. Anytime a young lady or a young man in Berkshire County or in Western Mass, and we catch wind of it, we'd like to give them the accolades they deserve. Regardless of how many years you play, it's still 1,000 points one way or another, and that's a great accolade. So congratulations to Alicia Mitchell from Springfield ICS.
And we're certainly going to be talking about Miss Mitchell as the season goes along, Rick, because she's such a dominant player inside, a very tall young lady, very skilled around that basket. You just need to talk to Coach Ian Downey about that. She's around that hoop all the time, and she presents real matchup problems for most teams in high school. So we're going to be talking about her as the Bulldogs clearly are going to be a team to be reckoned with both during the regular season and in tournament play. But it was a short end of the stick there for Greylock, but they get right back at it coming up against Monument Mountain actually tomorrow night. They play Monument Mountain at home, so that'll be a good test for Coach Jacoby's Mounties. The Drury Blue Devils on the side of the girls going back to that, Rick, is you alluded to, they played Greylock in a very difficult game, and for Coach Ian Downey, a big win for them, really a necessary win for them in that one, and a good rivalry game, as you pointed out.
Yeah, and everybody's in league play right now. Almost the majority of time, will you not see a league game the rest of the way? You might have an independent game here or there coming up for the boys and the girls, but yeah, it was a couple of league games, and that was a big win. Jacinta Felix led the way with 15 points. Hannah Lacasse, she's a sharpshooter. She's a sophomore too. She's a shooter. She had 11. Lauren Davis had 10, and first year ninth grader Eva Mosher had 9. So that's really good. She's getting some playing time. Coach Downey's working her in.
Right.
She's battling underneath. She's playing good defense, good rebounder, and scoring some points. So maybe not double figures all the time, but she gives them what they need. And that win over Mount Greylock, the Blue Devils needed in the worst way too, coming off that loss against Tuzik, and in that game, the kids that you normally see in there, like Brooke Bishop, wasn't a mainstay, played a role, but not the scoring. So when you get some of the kids like Felix, Lacasse, and Davis to lead the way, when you're leading scorer like Alyssa Russell just was off that night. And you never know unless you're at the game, Tim. You don't understand how many minutes they play. Could have been foul trouble, but there are reasons why some of the leading scorers don't lead every game, and that's why coaches need their other kids to step up, which they did. Unfortunately, they couldn't put 2 in a row, though, as they got outscored 20-4 in the second quarter and lost to Agawam 48-29. Lauren Davis, only Blue Devil in double figures with 11. I would think that it was a disappointing win for Coach Downey because he played Agawam really, really tight last year, two pretty close ball games. I think he felt the same way. But you and I have talked about this many times, that when you have the home-and-home games against league teams, a loss on the road doesn't mean that you're going to lose at home, and vice versa sometimes. So it's the same team, but you never know what happens in between. Who's in, who's out, who practiced, who didn't, what team is playing their best ball at that time. And Drury's got Ludlow coming up tomorrow night, and then Mount Everett. So they like the Mounties and the Lady Hornets and McCann really need to start putting a few together here at this time of the season.
And this is turning out, this girls' Central Division League, which has Springfield ICS, Belchertown, Monument, Drury, Agawam, Greylock. It's turning out to be a very, very competitive league, Rick.
Yeah, and if you take a look at the standings right now, and again, it's very early, it's halfway through, but if you took out last year's standings, you'd probably pretty much see those same teams exactly where they are right now. Belchertown and Springfield ICS were towards the top. Monument, Drury, and Agawam, and Greylock kind of in the middle, and Ludlow towards the very end. So you can be a pretty decent basketball team, boys or girls. Somebody's going to finish first, somebody's going to finish last, one way or another.
Right.
Even if you knock each other off. But it may not be quite as tough as the Suburban, where the Hurricanes play, but it's a pretty tough division.
It really is. It's shaping up to be that way. You look at that Springfield ICS, Drury, Belchertown, they'll play with anybody, these teams. So, and it seems like it's pretty competitive.
Yeah, Belchertown's only loss, Tim, was to the Blue Devils in the opening game of the season. For some reason, I think it becomes matchup, but Drury plays Springfield ICS even tighter than some of the other teams. And I know that when they get Monument Mountain again, they're gonna want that one badly too, payback. So, yeah, it's a tough division.
Yep. The Lady Hurricanes, Rick, they're on a roll. They've won 5 in a row, and they had a couple of big games this past week. And we're going to also talk about your home and home or home and away series theory on that, because that was the issue here in this one with Hoosick Valley. But they're starting to put their game together, and they had a very hard-fought victory early on over Munson in the week when they took Munson down up at Hoosick Valley.
Yeah, don't forget, it wasn't that long ago that we were up in Cheshire doing the Hoosick and Drury girls game, and they had lost to Pittsfield, and they got a big win after that loss. So they came into the Drury game with a win, but then they took off after that Drury win. And like you said, Tim, now they're at 5 in a row. And the first game of the week, they knocked off Munson in Cheshire. A pretty good ball game, 43-35. Munson gave them a battle. Ashlyn Schur, the outstanding sophomore point guard, led the way with 13, and Taylor Garabedian, always steady with double figures, and especially in rebounds. She had 10 points. And then they won a huge game. And this was really, really big, Tim. This is the one you're talking about.
A lot of implications both for the season and for the tournament.
Yeah, that win against Amherst at home in Cheshire after losing the first time by a pretty significant margin down in Amherst. Right. It was a great win. They won that ball game 42-39, kind of a low scoring defensive affair, but the big player in that game was Abby Scalaba, the former standout at Mount Greylock, starting to come into her own now, learning the Hoosick Valley offense and defense and the Hurricanes program. And she had a big game. She had 13 points, and she knocked down 3 threes in the ball game, and 2 of them were huge points of the ball game down the stretch in the fourth quarter when the Hurricanes came back and won that game.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out in that game also, Rick, to Gabby Billets. You don't see her in this game scoring a lot of points, but she had a monster of a game on the boards against a much taller Amherst squad. She really held her own and came up with a lot of big rebounds and a couple of key baskets late in that game. And she really did a lot of the dirty work for the Hurricanes underneath that basket. So just a special shout out to her. As, her play was vital in that particular contest. But as you pointed out, Rick, Abby Scalaba, she's our girls player of the week this week because she had some big baskets in that huge win over Amherst.
And she could play. And when I know that she was part of that Hoosick program to start the season, that's a big boost for that team too. She's a very good player, and she knew coming in that her role might be a little bit different at Hoosick than it was at Greylock, but nevertheless, she just goes out and plays hard every game, and she's a team player. She seems to be the all-around type of ball player. But when they needed it the most and they needed some scoring, she came through for them the other night.
And coming up for Lady Hurricanes tomorrow night up at Hoosick Valley, a rematch between Hoosick Valley and the undefeated Lady Warriors of Wacona, who have a record of 7-0. That should be a real dandy of a contest. They played earlier in the season down in Dalton. In fact, it was the opener of the season, and Wacona prevailed in that one. Hoosick Valley, due to illness, did not have Taylor Garabedian or Gabby Billets playing in that one. So it'll be interesting to see how they match up this time up in Cheshire.
I think it's going to be a great ball game. It's got the makings of a good one. We always seem to mark down on the calendar, Tim, when we see the schedule come out.
Right.
When are the Hurricanes playing the Warriors, both in Cheshire and down in Dalton? And it's going to be Coach Liz Kay. We talk about her team, not as much as the 4 teams that we cover here in North County, but it seems to be the team that we talk about pretty much the most throughout Berkshire County.
And if you can't make that game, Northern Berkshire Community Television, I'll be there along with John Franzoni, who'll be joining me for the broadcast of that one. It'll be on tape. So you want to check our listings on channel 1302 for the rebroadcast cast of that game if you can't make it, but certainly if you're around and you can be there in person, you want to see it. They're two of the finer teams, girls teams in Western Massachusetts. Rick, let's turn our attention to the boys' action here now. That we had some big games as well on the boys' side, and we'll get going with the McCann Tech Hornets now. Interestingly, now they've even Rick their record at 500 at 4-4, and they had a big win over Hamden Charter.
Yeah, they knocked off Hamden Charter 63-44. Jake Howland, who we talk about a lot on this program, was the Hornets' leading scorer last year as a sophomore and this year as a junior. Had 17. Walt Mazza had 10, and they opened up a close game. After the first quarter, they outscored Hamden 34-9 in the second and third quarters and took over after that. Unfortunately, they couldn't put two of them together as they lost to Ludlow 52-35. Here, they only trailed by 3 points at the half, but got outscored 31-17 in the second half. Howland and Colby Marco, the senior center, each with 11 points. And then they suffered a real tough loss. Anytime you lose by a point, they played Smith Academy from the Hampshire North, which is the Greylock Mounties division that they play in. And they played at Smith Academy and only lost 36-35. That was a tough loss. Howland, Marco, and Eric Ruja all with 9 points. Eric, the sophomore we talked about early in the season, stepping up to help his team out. McCann trailed by 7 points, 30-23, leading the fourth quarter. But then they got on a roll, and they outscored Smith 12-6 in the final frame, only to fall 1 point short. So that's a tough loss. But they are sitting at 500, and I think they're a 500, or I think they're above a 500 team this year. I think you'll see them with more wins than losses down the stretch. I'm very positive of that, or at least in my mind, in my heart. They've got Mount Everett coming up tonight at home. They're going to want revenge on that game. They opened up the regular season against Mount Everett in the Franklin Tech Holiday Tournament and lost a close game to the Eagles, so they're going to want to take that one. And then they got Lee. So a couple very competitive games for the Hornets. A good chance for them to pick up a couple of wins here.
Absolutely. Rick, Hoosick Valley had a mixed week this past week. They had a nice victory defeating Palmer for the second time this year, featuring a huge second half by Frank Field. But that was a nice win for Hoosick Valley down at Palmer.
Yeah, wasn't quite as easy as the game that we covered in the opener, but they still won 79-59. And Frank Field, as you said, led the way. He had a big night scoring. He had 33. Mike Szabo had 13. Joey McGovern had 11. The Hurricanes are sitting at 5-2, 4-2 in the league. So they're doing okay. They were hanging around that 500 mark for a while, right. And just like the Lady Hurricanes were sub 500 for a while. But the boys as well as the girls are playing better basketball now. Unfortunately, they ran into a very good South Hadley team, Tim, in the game that you and I just covered this week. They lost that one by 10, 49-39. The score was closer than the game was played. It wasn't really a 10. It was a 4 or 5 point game. It was all foul shots down the end,
right?
As it sometimes it can be. Joey McGovern had a really good game for the Hurricanes. He had 16. Frank Field, who had a very quiet first half, only scoring 2 points, scored 10 in the second half for a total of 12. And they've got East Hampton coming up tonight and Pioneer Valley visiting the Hurricanes. So 2 home games, and hopefully they'll be favorable on both of those.
Yeah, that was an interesting game with South Hadley. Again, we broadcast that game. We taped it, and it's on channel 1302. So check your listings for the rebroadcast of that game between South Hadley and Hoosick Valley. This is a very good South Hadley team, and I think you'll see here in this one, Joey McGovern, the sharpshooting junior for the Hurricanes. Again, unlimited range. He got Hoosick Valley going quick with some threes, and a great feed there to Kamari Kastner. Quinal Bradley, the other freshmen, teamed up. Hoosick Valley, Rick, they got some great action out of their freshmen. This is a young
Yeah, they
squad.
certainly did. They had their 3 ninth graders on the floor for quite a bit, and but when it came down to towards the end, was a very, very experienced and powerful South Hadley team that could knock down that outside shot like you just saw. But they were really, really good driving to the basket. And they were very, very strong. You'll see this final play here that they just go up strong and use the glass and sometimes draw a foul at the same time. But there's nothing flashy about South Hadley.
No.
I can tell you that for sure. But they move the ball really, really well. They look to penetrate. They're decent shooters. I can understand why South Hadley is sitting at 4-0 overall, 3-0 in their league.
Yeah, and again, this was a game we talked about during the broadcast. It was a game of pace. I'm sure Coach Robinson was very, very happy with the pace of play. He got South Hadley to slow down and play a very deliberate game, kept the score low, and he was in position for a possible upset victory here. They just couldn't put down that basket when they needed it. Their shooting was not particularly good in this game. But if you had said before the game, hey, if you can keep South Hadley in the 40s, you think you'll be in the game, I'm sure he would have agreed. There was no question.
Yeah, and I also stated, Tim, at halftime of that game that you and I did, that Frank Field only had 2 points.
Right.
And Huzik did not shoot well on their 3-ball in the first half. And what we said at halftime was that if your leader and leading scorer has 2 points and you have not been able to knock down your threes and you're only trailing by 4 points, I'd take that. And that game was could have been a 4 or 5 point game easily. It was just the free throws at the end of the game. The Hurricanes did use a great game plan. They slowed everything down. They walked the ball up. They used the clock. They followed Coach Robinson's plan to a T. And the only thing was they came up a little bit short on the score.
Right. And, so Huzik Valley now marches on. They're playing, as you said, East Hampton tonight, a team that they beat earlier. Obviously, we talked about that. And then they play a very good Pioneer Valley team on January 17th. So it doesn't get any easier for any of these teams as they are into the meat of their regular season leagues. So these games are all going to be tough from here on out. Drury had a tough week this past week, Rick. They lost a couple of games, one particularly that probably was a surprise, but they lost to an undefeated Hopkins Academy team on the road, and that's a good basketball team.
They are a very, very good basketball team. You could see them coming up last year. They lost two studs, two incredible seniors down there at Hopkins to graduation, and still are sitting with a 7-0 record overall, 4-0 in the Hampshire South. And I got a chance to talk to Coach Rossett just for a moment, and I asked him kind of what happened down there, and he said, it's pretty simple. We just didn't play well.
Right.
Period. And he just left it at that. And very seldom on this show over the last, I'd say 4 to 5 years, do we ever say the Drury had a horrible week.
Right.
I mean, they may split. They may go 1-2 or 2-1, 1-1. But very, very seldom have we reported over the last few years the Blue Devil boys losing both games that they played during the week. They lost that game to South Hadley 74-50. Kept it close at halftime, kept it around 8 points or so. But just when you want to put that push on to start that second half, Hopkins put their own push on instead. In that game, Louis Gelati, the outstanding senior for the Blue Devils, scored 32 points. Ahmad David had 11. And then in the other game you were talking about, Drury's rebound game off Hopkins would have been Maher at home this week. And they took one on the chin, which upset a few people. And you don't play the game on paper, Tim. You
Right.
play the game on the floor. So you can't take a look to see, what Maher did with other teams, but they did struggle against Lennox. Drury did for a little bit against Lennox in the first half, and then really poured it on in the second half. But you can't take a look and see what other teams have done against its matchups. It's defense is how you're shooting that night. And they lost that game to Maher in a real close one at the Bucky Village Drum, 51-49. Again, Louis Gelati with 32. So he 32 points in both games and 2 losses, unfortunately. Ahmad David had 6 with 9 rebounds. But they're not getting backcourt scoring, and they're not getting scoring from Sammy Mormon. And without that, it's too much for your 2 seniors to lead the way. Right. So plenty of time left in the season, whole second half. Coach Rissett's got a lot of practicing to do with these kids, try to get them a little bit of confidence, get them a couple wins under their belt. They're still sitting okay. They're 3-2 in the league, 5-3 overall. This is a league that they won last year in the first season of the new format. And with Hopkins Academy and Pioneer Valley, it's going to be really, really tough for the Blue Devils to repeat. But they just need to start playing better basketball, especially offensively.
And, you know, we've watched Drury for so long. Coach Rissett, that's one of the things you can pretty much count on. This will be a better team. At the end of the season, they will improve from where they are now. And they're going to be a team that's going to be reckoned with in Division 5 in Western Massachusetts. And then we've got a co-player of the week this week. One of our co-players of the week, Rick, Louis Gelati, the outstanding senior.
Yeah, you can't have a young man or a young lady score 32 points in 2 consecutive games and not give him the accolades. We did Louis last week on the scoring of his 1,000th career point at Drury. These were 2 losses. I'm sure he would rather turn those points into 2 W's, but it didn't work out. But nevertheless, he was the bright and shining star for the Blue Devils this week. Louis Gelati, the outstanding senior from Drury.
He is. He's a scoring machine.
The other thing I wanted to add, Tim, is the Blue Devils go on a road trip. Now, you hear a lot about road trips with professional teams, the West Coast trip. Well, this is their over-the-mountain trip where they play the next 6 games. Either they play in Dalton, they play the Wacona Warriors, but everything else is over the mountain in the Pioneer Valley in Hampshire South action.
Yeah,
they're not home again until February.
Right, and they've got some tough games, as you alluded to. Pioneer, they're going to play Pioneer Valley tomorrow night. And then, of course, they come back on Monday night, and they're down in Dalton to face a very good Wacona team. So it's not going to be easy for the Blue Devils. The Mounties of Greylock, Rick, they've evened their record now at 500, 4-4. They had a couple nice wins this past week.
So unlike the Blue Devils, Coach Bob Thistle's Mounties had a very, very good week. 2 games, 2 wins. They started off knocking off Lee 69-57. Seamus Barnes with 20. Now, what you and I talked about, Tim, on this show, and I brought it up a few times, we saw Seamus Barnes excel in the opener up at Drury this year in the game that you and I did. And he just had his way. They put him in the paint, hit him. He hit some soft jumpers from the lane. And the Blue Devils had no answer for him that night. And he went off for 22 points. Has been very quiet of late. And what I had said was, even though Max McAllister and Chase Doyle have been leading the way, their backcourt, they're going to have to get some front court scoring. And they certainly did it with Barnes. Chase Doyle with 19 and Max McAllister with 10. So the kids that have been scoring are still scoring. But that's the recipe that Coach Thistle needs, is balanced scoring on his team. And then they defeated Athol 66-51. Again, Doyle with 22 and Barnes with 17. So again, they're getting the scoring that they need. And no surprise, Tim, in the Hampshire North, where Mount Greylock went 10-0 last year, winning the league, they're sitting right on top right now, 3-0. Even though they're 4-4 overall, those losses came to other D4 and 5 teams in Western Mass, but not in their league. So they're headed for the same story, I think, as last year. However, they are senior-oriented with a little bit more experience.
Right.
And I think that's going to give them a chance for a better run in the postseason.
Yep, and joining Louis Gelati as our co-player of the week this week, it's the senior Chase Doyle, the outstanding shooting guard for the Mounties. Yeah,
19 versus Lee, 22 versus Athol. He was the Mounties' leading scorer last year as a junior, and he has not disappointed. They're going to need him to continue along with his backcourt partners and also the kids up front. So congratulations to Chase Doyle and to Louis Gelati, co-players of the week for the boys this week.
That's going to do it for this week on High School Basketball Weekly. Remember, you can see High School Basketball Weekly every Thursday night at this time, 7:30 p.m. We rebroadcast at 10 o'clock Saturday morning and then Sunday evening at 7 p.m. And you also want to check your listings on channel 1302 for any number of games that Rick and I will be covering as we go through the season here at channel 1302. So until next week, for Rick Bull, I'm Tim Morey saying goodbye for High School Basketball Weekly.
So long, everybody.